All right, it's been a little while since the last form. Let's get started and do a couple more forms in React. Today we're going to work with the Formik library. So let's go ahead and install that. npm install Formik. And we're going to make a couple of forms with Formik because there's different ways to use the Formik library. So Formik's been installed. And let's go ahead and start it up. So for the first way we're going to use Formik is with the hook. So import useFormik from Formik. And we want to do a couple things. We want to const Formik is equal to useFormik. And we want to create some initial values. Let's just call it initial form values. We're going to make this in a second. And let's create a on submit. We'll call this submit handler. We're also going to make this. So let's make the initial values outside the function. So const initial form values, and I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's really just nothing special. So empty string for email, username, password, and bio, and color will start off as red. And then we'll do a const submit handler. So Formik will give us values, which will be type of our initial form values. And we can just log that, console.log values. And then we can do a to-do reset the form. Cool. Okay, so then this Formik object gives us a lot of nice stuff, which we'll destructure. But for now, all we're going to do is pull out two things, the values and the handle change. We're going to apply these to each of our inputs. So let's start with our email input. Let's do value is equal to values.email, and on change will equal to handle change. And then same thing for our other three inputs. So values dot, and TypeScript will help us out here, right? So we don't have to assume. Values dot password. Where's the select? Right here. Values dot color and values dot bio. And it's complaining because, let's refresh, let's double check. That's fine. Okay, so this might be just enough to get the forms going. Let's try it out. Let's try, I don't know, giraffe at example.com, giraffe. Let's elevated. Let's do color green. Let's go, I am a giraffe, submit. Okay, so then the form refreshes, which is not what we want because we have to, we didn't use our submit handler, or on submit. So on submit is equal to submit handler. Are we missing something here? Let's see. On submit is equal to handle submit. Initial values. So this needs to be pulled out of Formik. Handle submit. Very confusing. My naming. So this is the function we named submit handler, and we gave it to the onSubmit property. So on submit, it'll call the submit handler function. And it's only going to call this if the validation passes. We didn't put any validation yet, but we'll only call this function if our validation passes. And we can pull this out of Formik with the handle submit. Okay, so submit. Let's type in our stuff again. Giraffe at example.com, giraffe elevated. Green, I am giraffe. Submit. Alright, so now we have everything logged. So that's good. That's pretty much Formik at its basic usage. So let's do a couple of things to make it a little bit more fancy. So one thing we can do is we can pull out the reset form from Formik, and we can put that right here. Reset form. Just a function we call. So let's just submit it one more time. We should reset the form. Perfect. And then we can also pull out the errors object, errors, and then let's apply an errors little message to each of our inputs. So let's put it right underneath the input. We'll put a small tag, give a class name of error, which we already styled, and errors.email. And we'll put this for every single input. Errors dot username, errors dot password, errors dot color, and errors dot bio. Okay. Again, we don't have any validation yet, so the errors will not really show. Let's put some validation. And the way we can do that is we can create a function. Let's call it const validate. And this will take in the values, same as our submit function. And then we can create a new function called const errors, or a new empty object called validate error type, which we're going to make in a second. Or I'm going to copy and paste that. Let's put it right at the top. So the validate error type is just a type that says, hey, we could have any of these in our object, our email, username, password, color, or bio, with a message, a string saying why the validation failed. So we're going to do a very simple validation. We're going to pull out everything from our values. So we'll do email, username, password, color, bio. And then we're going to check, all we're going to do is check if it's there. So if it's an empty string, here you go. So if no username, then errors.username would be username is required. No email, email is required. And then we return the errors. Did I validate, not validate, validation. So if our validate function returns an object that's not empty, we are not gonna call the submit handler function. Formik will make sure that doesn't happen. So we can say our validate function is validate, or we can just, since the name and the key are the same, we can just say validate. I'll leave it like this just to make it more obvious. And let's test it out. So submit. Here we go. We got our validation. Password required. Email fine. So by default, we will it'll change the validation as soon as you start typing, as you can see. I don't really like that, so we'll just put another option here. So you validate on change, and we'll set this to false. So it's only going to validate when you press submit. So let's type in a giraffe at example.com, giraffe elevated. I'll leave the bio empty on purpose. Submit. Bio's required. Required bio. Submit. And everything's good. We have validation. We have validation that only activates when we submit the form. We have way to show error messages with the errors object. And we can reset the form. We can log our values and do whatever we want with them. And that's using the Formik form, using the useFormik hook.